So 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Alison Grieve. Alison, welcome to the Skills for Mars podcast.
Hi, Julia. It's really fun to be here. I can't believe I'm doing this with you, but this is really fun.
It's been a long time, right? I think we've got a year 3 years ago for
Yeah,
something else we wanted to do.
yeah. That's when we first started testing out this gear and
Mhm.
and working out what we were going to do with podcasts
Yes,
and sharing our knowledge and finding out what other people know. So it's great that we finally got here.
I agree. It's really exciting, and I think it's just
It's,
fair to let everyone know that actually we go back quite a long time. We've been working together since I was a real amateur in competencies, and with you I became a professional.
oh, that's very kind of you. No, but we have been working together in various guises
Yeah,
for many, many years
for
now.
many years. I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Many fun experiences on the way. Yes.
So it's really, really fun and exciting for me to have you here. And this is the first Skills for Mars podcast. And I think I'm happiest to have you because you have been a lifetime coach, mentor, facilitator in change agility, immunity to change, dealing with ambiguous situations, with uncertain situations. So I'm very, very happy to have you and talk about this because the world is changing. So yeah, what best to start the discussion with than actual change and what it means.
Oh, yes. I'm really happy to be joining you on your first one too, on a topic that's very dear to my heart. Yes, it's such fun.
So just to start with, for the listeners to know who you are, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what it means to be a coach and facilitator in change and change agility? What do you do on a daily basis?
So I'm a coach, facilitator. I'm interested in leadership and people development and growth. And for me, change is all about us. And I'd say over the last 10 years, we're seeing change happening more and more, and faster and in bigger jumps than before. And I'm really interested in, and I'd say it's not just interest, actually, I'm really passionate about how we can help people be the best they can be in whatever guise that is. And I really like the idea that people um, have very different perspectives on life and their aspirations and come with different skills and experiences, and how we can build on that. To achieve whatever it is they're wanting to. And I like also the fact that we can then connect that into organizational success. So, how do you help organizations to be the best they can be, but at the same time aligning that with individuals? So, I really enjoy my work, and I think it's always changing too. So, as someone who loves variety and loves differences, but can still feel the pain of change, um, then and can also feel the fear of it. I think it's exciting times. Yeah,
I agree. You work with individuals, teams, and organizations, all of
yeah,
them.
all of them.
Uh, is there a certain skill, or are there certain skills that are on the discussion board for companies or for individuals? Something that maybe they feel that they have to learn, or they're keen on having as and learning as a skill right now because their world of work is changing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know that there's lots of forces out there that are causing organizations to feel um, that they need to adapt better.
Mhm.
You know, we talk about the political stuff that's going on at the moment that leads to lots of uncertainty in businesses. And as humans, we're not very good with uncertainty. We like to know what's going to happen next. We do evolve, but very slowly. And there's also, competitive forces that, changing where stuff's getting produced. And so I think there's lots of change in organizations, and how you can get leaders and individuals to be able to embrace those is very difficult, and not feel so uncomfortable or so resistant and challenging for innovation.
Mhm.
Many organizations are struggling with innovation, and yet if they don't innovate, they're going to be dead. And that's why we see this market for, lots of people talk about disruption. And that's because other people are seeing opportunities because these existing organizations are not able to do it. So how do we help people become more agile, deal with ambiguity better, lead and be the catalyst for change rather than waiting for it to happen to them? But at the same time, we can see the forces of resistance there, which, in part are by people protecting their own vested interests, so they think, but also the fear that comes with change. So if
Mhm.
people are going to embrace change, I think we have to learn to become more comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Yes, that's one of the sayings of one of the sports coaches I was following. She always made me laugh.
Like, yes,
I can
no,
always remember her in my head. Yes.
yeah,
It's really funny because I've been talking lately. There's all this discussion about how cashiers are going to be left without work, taxi drivers, even lawyers, especially the routine tasks
mm,
in what they're doing. But it's very funny because cashiers, they are feeling it, and here in the Netherlands there is a supermarket chain that is actually starting and experimenting a supermarket without any kind of human being. So you would just get in with a credit card. You'd put the stuff in your basket, and then the basket would know, and the shelves would know exactly what you bought. They would be directly charged to your credit card, so no human being needs to be involved. And now they are actually testing it right now. So I
yes,
think that's maybe 5-10 years away, because they have to see if it works. It's still their employees testing them. So cashiers somehow feel it. But I was talking in more details and asking more taxi drivers, how do they feel? Because everyone is talking, Tesla works here, so you can have a driverless Tesla.
yeah,
Some of them think about it, but none of them are worried. And they're laughing, and it's quite funny because they say, hey, yes, actually, uh, even if they have these driverless cars, how they call them, it's always funny. They still need a human being present because they cannot let them go on the road without an actual driver. Not yet. They are still in testing phase. So first of all, they still need to have us for that period of time until they test them. And then they also believe that customers will not want to go in an empty car if they don't have a permit, and they would feel safer if they have someone there. So they don't really feel worried.
yeah.
But
I don't know.
yeah, others are actually warning us that, hey, this is coming, so we need to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the taxi drivers. There's lots of talk about how they're going to be
Mm.
outsourced and outmanaged by, um, yeah, by autonomous vehicles. But I think maybe one day it will get there. They are struggling with all the technology that's needed for it, and I think there's probably other industries that train drivers, for
Mhm.
example. I'd have thought that would be a better first target, because they're on a track.
Mhm.
So there's not so many places to program them to. Now,
Yeah.
that might mean changing a lot of track. I don't know the details of the technology, but there's no doubt that whether it's taxi drivers or the way we shop, Amazon have been testing a lot of their shops with in the States and now Amsterdam, with no
Mhm.
people involved at all. You can see it in airports. You can check in. You don't need to see a person. You print off your boarding pass and go through yourself. So I think we're going to see a lot more automation of jobs that are currently done by humans. And in a way, I think that's quite interesting because that's going to create new jobs for us as well. So somebody's going to have to manage these machines, these
Yes.
robots, and so I think it's going to create a whole different level of types of jobs. And so some of the skills will be almost how do we work with these
Mhm.
machines more effectively? So just as we had to cope with the original industrial revolution, I think this is another version of it. And so some jobs will go, but other jobs will be created. But it's a huge change and shift in mindset that certain things that have been around for all our lifetime is suddenly gone, and other things will be playing out that we can't
Yeah.
imagine yet.
Like it happened
Um,
before as well. This
yeah,
is not the first time.
And I think also that whole thing about managing huge amounts of information, I mean, computers can do that much better. And so some of the professional jobs who've always thought lots of status comes with it and it takes a lot of studying and
Mhm.
knowledge to have those roles. Well, guess what? A computer can do it better. There's already evidence that computers are better at diagnosing medical symptoms than a human. Now, to one extent, you'd say, yep, that's great. I'd rather have the computer adding me all up, but I kind of like the human side of it.
Yeah.
There's nothing like the human touch. So, yeah, I
It's
think there's
it
huge
is in, it
change
is
in how we're going to
incredible.
do it.
It is
Yeah,
incredible as a shift of mindset, because even if we know that they make decisions on data, they can make decisions on data better, right? If they have the right
yeah,
algorithms behind, we still trust the human. Still trust the human more. And I was
yeah.
talking to someone today about trust in assessments, the ones that are done via algorithms, and it's the same
Mm,
thing, that we don't really understand what is behind and how it's done, so we can trust the results.
yeah.
Rather discuss them with a human being.
Yes, and of course you would, because there might be opportunities. That's why I don't think our job's going to be gone for a long time, because understanding, analyzing, and making meaning out of some of these test results, I think, is a very human job, and some of the connections that you can see. So, having just done quite a few tests recently, yesterday and today, and discussed them with individuals, it would be very difficult to on one day they may do it, but it'd be very difficult to take all the meaning and the connections and the information that you get live from an individual to make sense of their profile and their assessment, which helps describe the kind of things they'd like to be capable of in the future, and making into that some useful action plan for going forward. So I think some jobs will be very difficult to automate in the shorter term, which could be like the next 20 years. I think who knows where it'll go. But
I actually
yeah,
wanted to
meaning is
ask you
hard.
if you think that the kind of work that we do and the kind of work that you do will disappear in the future, or is it still one for the future, like being a coach and facilitator in change
Oh, I
and
think
agility?
yeah. So of course, maybe I've got a blind spot here, like the taxi drivers,
Mhm.
and I think, oh no, my job won't go. So that's something to reflect on. But uh, I think because there's such a level of human aspect to it, and particularly in the coaching and the facilitation, I think that's the piece that adds the real value. So yes, I think there'll be aspects of my role that we could give to a
Mhm.
computer. I could have a robot in the office managing the logistics, but I don't think they'd be able to do the same kind of coaching.
If I think about actually giving feedback to people, I think they're more reluctant to get it from a computer, and even from a piece of paper. They want an explanation from a human being. They want to understand it and to
Yeah,
be explained in the language that they understand. So and they want a human touch.
yeah,
So that I don't think will change. But I am thinking about
yeah,
recruitment, and I think that at some point now, candidate assessment is something that you still is still very much human, right? Even though you can do it via systems, but it's
yeah,
still very much human. And I know of companies that wanted to move everything and transform everything into digitalized recruitment, and they failed because
yeah,
people in the end did not show up for work. So the whole process was digitalized, very good, but people, because they never had a human interaction, they did not show up for work. So that's still interesting, right? But I can see it going there in the future. Whereas psychology, I don't think, I think that we still need that, and that's
yes. I think so too. I think we could, because there's stories about attaching people with electrodes so you can get their thoughts and feelings. And I mean, as somebody who's interested in psychology and people and reactions, you go, "Oh, that's very interesting." However, really to make decisions about people on whether they're suitable for the job or not, I think there's so many more factors that play into it. And yeah, I wouldn't be ready to just give it all over to a
to
computer to make
computers.
the
Not
decision.
yet, not
Not
yet.
yet.
They are not yet there yet.
No.
They are
I mean, there
slowly
might come a
gaining.
time
Yeah.
they will get there. Yeah.
Yes, they might get there, considering that a lot of recruitment is made on intuition. which
Most
is
of
not,
it.
yeah, which is not even 50-50.
No, exactly.
It's
We've got evidence we're
yeah,
really not very good.
we are not really very good with intuition. So yeah, we are 60% wrong. So not even 50-50, the proverbial 50-50. So yes, maybe, but they
Yeah,
definitely do add to the data. So we make better decisions because we have various kind of technologies involved in the process. That's for sure.
that's right. So we can increase the accuracy
Hmm.
of our choices and decisions because we've got lots of data and input. And, you know, I think the electronic processes we now have in place means that we can have much more thorough
Hmm.
recruitment practices and much fairer recruitment practices too. So it's much more difficult for people just to hire their friends or somebody because they like them, because now you can get so much more information, and then you have a balanced view about whether they really can do the job or not.
Yeah.
So I think from an inclusion, diversity, and fairness perspective and consistency, um, yeah, automation has really brought huge advances. And you know, lots of the research from
Hmm.
neuroscience has helped us to understand people's motivations and what they're like.
Yeah.
But there's still a
And
long way
abilities,
to go.
yes. Innate
Yeah,
abilities. So yes, there's still a long way to go. They still make mistakes. There's still bias because it's inputted by humans. So the algorithms are made and created by humans, but it's way easier to check them and verify for biases and take them out.
exactly. Yeah. And until you meet someone,
Mhm.
you really can't know. I met a crazy guy last Monday who sailed, well, no, he kayaked across the Atlantic, from Newfoundland in Canada to Ireland. A complete nutcase. He's actually done it several times, not on his own. The first time, so he's done it once completely on his own. I can't remember how many days it took, but you see this kayak and you go, you're a complete nutter. So when I was reading the blurb before I met him, you're kind of like, what is a person like who does something like that? I mean, that is someone who puts themselves on the edge every day,
Mhm.
and is willing to risk their life to do something. But until, you know, so we could have run a battery of tests on him and it would have given, you know, another picture. But until somebody starts to explain to you some of their internal drive and motivation and what they really like about it and some of the funny moments, um, a computer wouldn't pick that up, and it wouldn't give you that depth of understanding of some of the things that he loved so much about it.
Mhm.
I mean, he talked one moment about rowing, trying to empty the boat of water, and it was this tiny thing, and there was a puffin sitting watching him on the boat, and so you, yeah, and I mean that's a visual that he has obviously carried with him, and was actually quite an important entertaining thing for him at the time. And so I think,
Wow.
yeah, unless you meet someone like that, you would never know. Whereas when you just get the dry assessment, a person could be all kinds of things, really.
True.
Yeah.
True. Wow, the courage and the perseverance.
Oh,
I think
I
we
know,
call it perseverance in
it's
English.
perseverance. So
Perseverance in proper English.
I do quite like the pronunciation of perseverance. But yes, so yeah, the man is a complete nutcase. I will let you know that he
Ah.
is.
But it's very interesting to talk to people like this because they have a totally different mindset and they are ready to put themselves in front of danger and risk everything. Now you might say they do it for the adrenaline rush, but at some point the adrenaline rush goes away and you are faced with real dangers. You are in
Yeah,
open waters in a small boat. There are storms. There are animals lurking in the water who could eat you alive.
yeah.
Water is lacking because you have a small boat. I mean, it takes you a while to.
And you have to be really innovative
Mhm.
and creative to overcome lots of the obstacles that
And fears as well. Yeah.
yeah. So in terms of lots of competencies to deal with the change and the
Mhm.
disruption that we're going on, I think somebody like that demonstrates some of them in a very extreme environment,
Mhm.
but you know that are useful for all of us. You know,
True.
that bravery and courage of, right, I'm going into the unknown. I've never done this before, is is exactly what happened to him on a daily basis on that mad kayak.
Maybe we'll get him on the podcast. Why not?
Yes,
Then he can really talk about this. That would be nice.
I will pass you his name.
Perfect. So talking about, because we understand that our jobs are not really so much in danger. This is beautiful for us.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really help anyone else, or maybe it does, because we can train people and mentor them in agility and change and leadership and learning and all of the others. So hopefully we do this via the podcast and via some other media.
Yeah.
So if you were to define this agility for change, how would you define it? How would someone recognize that they have it? Whether they are HR in an organization and they need to understand if their people have this agility for change so they can run transformations, or whether it's an individual listening to us and wanting to know, hey, am I able to go through change or not? Am I ready for this?
Well, there's a few characteristics of people who have a lot of it, which makes them stand out from the average, average levels of it. And the kind of things that people who are very agile do is they like to try new things, and they're very curious about a wide range of things. They also can learn from one experience and they apply it in first time situations. It's a standard definition that was that Corn Ferry came out with, which I really like. And it's really saying, if you have never done something, then how on earth are you going to know what you're going to try doing? And it's that approach to just leap in and have a go and say, well, this might work. I've tried it in something else completely different, but it looks like there might be something similar here. And people who are very agile will spot those situations and come up with those rules of thumb. And they're not afraid, or they might be a bit afraid, but they're willing to jump in and have a go. And then they'll learn from it, so that we talk about agile in organizations being a sort of small cycle of things. So that plays out in this. People will have a go, learn from it, and have another go. And they're also really good at working with a wide range of people and interested, because they're interested in different perspectives. So it's not just their own narrow perspective. They want to understand more because it helps them see the world and the situation and whatever it is that they're grappling with in different ways. So they'll seek out inputs from a wide range of people. And then they really like tough stuff that nobody else has done. So we probably met a few of these people in our lifetimes, most of us, but when you do see them, they are quite remarkable, and they've got this capacity to just so it goes much beyond technical functional skills. It is a capacity about dealing with the complexity of things and an interest in it, and trying to come up for solutions that brings everybody along with them. So amazing leaders when we can find them.
And I think
Yeah.
one key thing to mention is the learning bit, being able to reflect on what they do.
They do. They reflect. So you could say to them at any time, what did you learn from that? And they can answer you quickly, because they do actually reflect regularly. So, many people, particularly in an interview process, I might say to somebody, so what did you learn from that? And they have to think about it for a while. People with high agility don't. They will already know what they've learned from that, and they will have applied it again. So they'll go, oh yes, well that's when I learned this, and now I've been using that, and it's actually been adapted so that for this situation I do it this way, and in another situation I do it another way. So they are continuously, intentionally learning and looking to learn as well.
If someone realizes they're not there yet, they maybe don't have the reflection, or maybe they don't like to go through big change and to challenge themselves all the time, can they still learn how to do this?
Absolutely. We are not fixed. So all the neuroscience and the MRI scanning has proven, thank goodness, you and I have always believed, which is that people keep growing throughout their life and keep learning all through their life. And so we're not kind of written off at age 20 or whatever as you're now an adult, that's you fixed, which was an old-fashioned view about what happened when you got to adulthood. So no, we can continue to grow and we continue to learn. and we can continue to learn how to view the world in a different way and to be able to do things in a very different way too. So our capacity can keep on growing. And I think that's something that's really important for all of us, because when we're young, we're in an environment where we're encouraged to learn and try new skills and be brave and do different things. If you think about when you're studying at school, you're learning a whole range of subjects, and you're doing sports and you're doing art and you're doing theatre and music, a whole range of stuff. And then when an adult comes, we're kind of responsible for doing all ourselves. And I think that's one of the things we should challenge ourselves, which is, how do I broaden all the things I'm learning about? How do I give myself my own learning curriculum to see what I can pick up, what might be interesting? So I love going back to the taxi drivers. I always remember a program called Who Wants, I think it was called, I can't remember. Anyway, a taxi driver won it. And it was a program where you had to know lots of general knowledge. And this taxi driver was amazing with his general knowledge because he read so much. And you just think, really? But those are good things. So I think everybody, whether you're a cashier, whether you're a taxi driver, a lawyer, an investment banker, a recruiter, you or I, we can be learning about lots of things. There's so much, and that will just help that overall thing. So it'll help you in your day-to-day job. Don't know how, but it will somehow. It gets those brain cells going.
Yeah, you
Makes us
start
more
learning
elastic.
how to learn and how to reflect
Yeah,
and how to get better every day, even if it's smaller things.
exactly.
Um, my partner went to Brazil for a dentistry thing, and what he came back with, he was kind of fascinated. People there were trying, the ones he was in touch with, they were trying to use, for example, if they were right-handed, they were trying to use and do things with their left hand. So
Yeah,
they would get better to doing something they've never done before and activate other pathways to doing things, or try to learn the language of the people that were there. So they were always challenging themselves, and because they didn't have the right tools to do what they had to do in dentistry, they were all the time tinkering with what they had, and every time
yeah,
came up with something new, some new tools to do things that they had to do and to solve the problems that they were facing. So he came back quite fascinating by this mindset of, hey.
yeah. I think it's fabulous. And I think we're seeing quite a lot of that in Africa, because somebody came back from Africa, a colleague recently, and was saying the things that you see people producing with old tires. So these are tires that just removed, they no longer work on vehicles anymore. And then they're making them into all kinds of things: chairs,
Mhm.
swings, shoes. Um, all sorts of handbags, and you just think the creativity
Mhm.
of taking something that here we wouldn't dream of doing that. And I think it's that anybody could do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it will be shifting. I think there will be professions. I don't think, even if taxi drivers at some point maybe will go away, cashiers will go away, or
yeah,
warehouse workers, or recruiters, or whatever, the jobs will be taken by AI. I think other jobs will be created for sure. But there is this period of ambiguity and uncertainty we all have to deal with, and that's another skill that I wanted to talk to you about. So how would you
yeah.
define, how would someone know if they are good at dealing with this uncertainty and ambiguity?
Well, you'd know if you were good because there's so much already around. So I think it would be an unusual person to say they hadn't noticed some
Mhm.
uncertainty in their lives or at work at the moment. And I think what happens is some people feel very anxious and stressed with it, whereas other people can actually really quite look forward to it. And so, if you're the kind of person that feels really stressed, doesn't like making decisions until you've got all the information, wants to check that it's perfect, then you're probably somebody who doesn't like the ambiguity and uncertainty of the world. And guess what? We'd like you to learn to live with it, because it's not going to go away. It's not good for your health to have those stressors on all the time. Cortisol will be
Mhm.
generated every time. So, how do you then start to become more comfortable with the ambiguity in the world. Because it's not that you can just start, you know, leaving decisions from being made, from putting things off to another day. Stuff needs to get done.
It will come and
And
bite you if you
yeah,
do
it
that.
does come and bite you, or by making no decision, a decision actually is made, and that not might not be what you intended, but that's what happens. So I think for people need to start to understand that we don't have to have all the right answers, and so we need to put in a little bit of structure and look at what we can control and what we can say or do. And so often it's just coming at it with a different perspective and saying, okay, what is all the unknowns, but what is some of the knowns? And so I can do something about the knowns now. And I can also make some assumptions and say, based on those assumptions, I'm going to do X or Y. And if the information changes and I find out that those assumptions are wrong, well, then I'll change at that point. But at least I'll have gained some clarity and I'll kind of understand a bit more about the path that I'm going down. So there are techniques and strategies that people can take on to help them um, find some a little bits of certainty and control when actually there's very little around them.
True. And I think one other important skill maybe to learn how to deal with is mistakes, dealing with mistakes, and then
Yeah,
making them. And then we all make them. And sometimes you have to apologize. Sometimes you have to go back and stand up and do it all over again. But it's really, really important to make mistakes. And I
it is.
believe everyone is praising this, but and everywhere you read, yeah, make mistakes. Start small, make small mistakes, see that you can live with them, and then learn from them, do better, and so and so.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have culturally inbred the problem of making mistakes. So I'd say one thing would be, you know, to any educators out there, if there's a way that we can somehow embrace making mistakes a bit more at school from very young ages. So I'd say from preschool, that actually it's a good thing for people to learn about those mistakes. So it doesn't mean say you keep making mistakes. I
Mhm.
think there's the learning process, and someone who keeps repeating the same mistake is not learning, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about making a mistake to learn from it so it doesn't happen
Mhm.
again.
Or at least you can
And
recognize you're not learning from it. You're making the same mistakes. You are going around in circles. So at some
exactly,
points,
so you're
that's something to tell you, hey, I have to change something.
yeah, exactly. And you think about all the big inventions, all the big breakthroughs in science, everything came because we attempted, experimented, tried it, learned from it, had a different go, went and tried it again, and didn't just give up, but adapted it every time. So we weren't doing, you know, I think as Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, you're mad.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's the idea that we don't keep doing the same thing. We look at it and we reflect and we think, how can I do it differently? And I think for us humans, there, particularly in relationships, we could be much more effective by looking at how we're approaching different situations and different people
Mhm.
and adapting ourselves.
True.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking about recognizing when you're not moving forward, and that's one of your other specialties. I think you're one of the not very many people
Oh, immunity
certified
to change.
certified in immunity to change. That's
Yes.
pretty much right, recognizing that you are blocked and you're not moving forward. Or you can
Yes.
describe it in better words, so I'll let you do it.
Well, no, immunity to change is exactly that. It was developed by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy from Harvard. An amazing pair of people, really, who have studied this area for many decades and are amazing gurus. And I was so privileged to be able to work with them. But immunity to change is when you know what to do. You've got all the knowledge, you understand the need for change, so you know that there's a real benefit to change, and you could even attempt it and start doing it, and then it falls away, and for one reason or another you almost sabotage yourself to not being able to put the change in. And situations. Robert Keegan's done some work with medical centers, and he said people know that they need to take these drugs because they've got a heart condition, and if they don't take it, they could die. So they know the drugs, they know why they need to do it, they know how to take it, and they do for a bit, and then they stop taking it, and why? And he would say that, and it's my experience too, working with my clients, is that sometimes we have an underlying need that actually goes, no, this is wrong, I'm not going to do it, and we call it immunity to change. And it's the description of, you have a psychological immune system just like you have a physical immune system, and in your physical immune system we have all our antibodies there ready to fight against the dreaded viruses or the bacteria when they come in, those foreign bodies. But sometimes with cancer, for example, they get it wrong, and then you find that your body's actually created the thing that it is fighting it in the first place, and that's what we need to work on. So our immune system can go a bit crazy, and it's the same thing psychologically. Psychologically, we have a system that's there running, looking at the world, making sure that we're psychologically safe, and sometimes it gets things wrong. And it might think, somebody who takes pills every day is a loser. And so therefore, they can take it for a couple of days, but then this underlying belief kicks in and says, I'm not a loser, I'm not one. And people are not even conscious of this. This is all done at an unconscious level. So we have a really nice process where you start to investigate. We call it creating a map. And what you're doing is really creating a map to understand what it is that you think and do that are preventing you from achieving those goals that you want. And sometimes it's the things that you're not doing
Mm-hmm.
that are also kicking in. So it's a wonderful process to help us unblock those long-term issues. Yeah. So
No, well, last time we spoke, I had an issue of my own, so I
mm,
think I'm on the way there. Just to tell everyone, I like cooking, right? And I believe that
mm,
I'm the best there is, so I don't let anyone touch what's in the kitchen. But it got to such a level that I'm very controlling about it, and then
mhm,
I really don't, even if it's works against my time and I don't have the resources to do it, I will not let anyone do it because I believe I can do it. I can do it better. So I had a bit of a struggle with it because I didn't have time. I had to let
yeah,
someone else do it. Someone else can do it, but I didn't like it,
no,
and nope. And then whenever I saw them in the kitchen, I would just say, yeah, you're doing it wrong, this is not the way to do it. Just trying to get it back. So I think it's getting better, but there was something there that was blocking me, and I think part of it was the praise that people like what I'm cooking.
yeah,
Part of it. So that was hard to give up, because then I would not get it.
yeah. How would you ever get recognition? Yeah.
Exactly, if you're not doing it. And
Yes, where's your value?
yes.
And so it's these deep things that we just
Hmm.
don't even realize. And a bit, so once we've identified some of those things, then we don't want to remove your immunity because it's adding value to you, it's keeping
Hmm.
you safe. And there are times when actually it needs to be there. And so what we would be doing is saying, actually, just for this one thing about cooking, for example, if you don't mind me using this, um, maybe sometimes it's okay for you not to do the cooking. Let's just test and see if people still value you if you didn't do the
Hmm.
cooking for one night. And let's see if you can get recognition for some other things. So we would create little experiments where you go and you start retesting it. And what that does is that rebuilds some of the neural pathways almost in your psychology. So you can start to go, actually, it's okay if I do this. I'm still safe. And my immune system's still functional. It doesn't need to protect me in this way. So then we can break through some of these changes. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts to work, but it was not an easy one. Even
No,
though it
they
sounds
never
very
are.
easy, and usually people give up cooking, like, yeah, I have no time, I'll just go to a restaurant. No, I really really love doing it. But I think part of it was the praise. So now I'm still working on it, because we spoke about it last time we met.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's okay. The other thing is that, these great changes don't come
Mhm.
quickly. So I think we have to be patient with ourselves too. They're not quick fixes. They're us really growing. And so I think we have to be patient and tolerant of ourselves too. Yeah,
True, true, true. And it takes time. That's what I'm learning. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight.
no.
So about that,
Mm.
now we spoke about immunity to change as well, and how you feel about it. Are there any others? So we spoke about change agility, dealing with ambiguity, a bit of learning agility, dealing with change. Are there any other skills or competencies that would help people survive in this world that is transforming around us?
I think people agility and collaboration
Mhm.
are really key skills. So, going to the robots, I think one of the things that's quite difficult for them to do is to work as part of a team or to collaborate. So they're kind of designed as, you know, individual. So it's not to say that that won't come, but I think it's still something where, you know, putting some humans together and we can brainstorm and just as we're doing here, have a conversation and the richness of the ideas and the thinking that comes up adds some extra value. So I think the other thing for people to think about is how much are they working with other people and where could they collaborate? Where could they share ideas and be more involved? So I think that sort of community of practitioners, people working together in teams, I think that can really help us and becoming more flexible in who you work with and trying to challenge yourself to work with very different kinds of people will give
Mhm.
another perspective, but also enriches us. So we know from research that we're happier if we're with part of a community, and we're healthier if we have a lot of social contact, and our mental health is stronger too. So, I think those are important things.
A question pops to mind, and then I'm thinking, how do we help people that have worked a lifetime alone in lonely jobs? Like we were talking about taxi drivers and cashiers. These are really lonely jobs, and the conversations that they have with customers are usually very short or not at all.
Yeah,
And then, like, it's a muscle, and learning a skill, learning a competency is like training a muscle when you go to the gym. So how could we help those people if they're moving and shifting to other jobs, let's say community related jobs, or something, to work in a team, and they have the other skills to do it, but they need to learn this? How would we support them in going about that and moving from maybe 10 years of working in a stationary, self-standing, individualistic job
yeah.
to something that is, yeah, requires the input of others?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big shift.
Mhm.
And I think the first thing for them would be to prepare themselves that this was actually going to be quite a change, but also to feel excited about it, that it can be interesting to find out what other people say. And I think they can go and practice in your day to day life. These things don't have to be, some such structured kind of program. You could just be sitting on the train. You
Mhm.
could be walking along the street. I know you might go, "Oh, I don't want to start." But if you see somebody, you could stop, have a good conversation with them, ask them some questions that you don't normally ask people. I think the questions that we ask every day, the very sort of, how are you? I'm British, so I'll ask about the weather and all of that kind of thing. I think we can ask different questions as well to people, which, what have you done recently that's
Mhm.
been really exciting? And what have you done that you're proud of recently? These are interesting
Mhm.
questions
Mhm.
and, make people think and then share something a bit more than just the day to day mundane. So I would suggest to people who are wanting to flex that people muscle a bit more and also the collaborating muscle to think about things in their personal life where they could start to work more, talk more to people, think about how they could ask for help.
Mhm.
Many of us are not very good at asking for help, but actually we all like to help. And a recent guy, a book that I read recently by a guy called Daniel Dyers, who it's called The 10 Types of Human. He talks about how there's our happy bit in our brain goes off when we help people. And I think we should be doing that. So going out and offering a hand and offering to help people. And that would be the first step in collaboration. So we can do it in our personal lives and then look for jobs that require
Mhm.
you to work with others. And even if you're in a what you think is a standalone job, you can still ask because maybe there's other things you can do. You know, if the shop is quiet and you're a cashier and you don't need, there's nobody around and somebody else is on the other cash desk, maybe you could go and help fill the shelves. You could ask them if they'd like a hand. And so those are things that could happen.
Yeah, and even start a conversation with them. And I think this goes even for other jobs, not only cashiers and taxi drivers, but I'm thinking software developers, right? It's a pretty much a standalone job. Data analysts, they sit in front of computers. And whereas I see data analysis just starting, right?
Yeah.
Because they work with big data and algorithms and so on. I do believe that at some point, maybe 20 years, maybe 25, this will all be replaced, right? It can easily be automated. And if you
Yes.
create, so at some point, they will be as well in the same situations as everyone else. And then they will have to switch careers. And this people agility and working with communities, we are social beings, uh, really helps. So yeah, it's a muscle that you have to
Well,
keep training.
and also I think from those skills, the kind of complexity and the types of things that we may still need human programmers
Mhm.
for will probably be too much for one human brain to be able to deal with. And the only way we're going to be able to be smarter and do the stuff the computers can't do is is because they can't code it. So that means it has to be about meaning,
Mhm.
and it needs to be the collaboration of multiple human brains that will come up with something that was never coded and is not logical and is not obvious. And that's where, you know, getting that collaboration will be a really exciting job for software developers
Mhm.
in the future, I think.
Yeah, that's really where we have the niche, because right now automation doesn't have meaning. They understand data, they can see patterns in data, but they don't understand meaning. So
Yeah.
that's where you can pretty much play it safe.
Yes. So for young people out there looking for jobs, find ones with
Yeah.
meaning.
And then what I'm also thinking out loud, that maybe one other thing we need to learn is what to do with our freedom. If we, let's say, go to not having work weeks of 40 hours a week, but we're going to 20 hours a week, which is not so bad. I would enjoy that. What do you do with the rest of your time? Do you
Yeah.
learn a new skill in arts? Do you start to play music, or do you start to draw? Do you go out more with your friends and have interesting conversations and I don't know, discuss philosophy or whatever? Maybe skills, so we can understand what to do better with our time when we have more free time. Even taking care of our
Yeah.
kids better, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So I think learning all those things that would help us become more agile,
Mhm.
because the world will be carrying on changing at such a pace. So I think we'll have time then to bring on board other skills, other ideas, other ways of thinking and approaching
Yeah.
problems, and working with people to come up with very different solutions. And by moving more into the arts field, or I don't know, other parts of science, because who knows where it's going to
Yes.
go, will expand our own capacity to think about things. And I think that's where we should be spending our free time in the future on other things. Yeah, not just sitting. Although sitting and reflecting is also a really useful time. You know,
Yes.
we wouldn't learn if we didn't reflect. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness
Mhm.
and growth mindset and all of that. And I think it's all just part of giving yourself time and space to get a perspective about things and to think, where else can I approach this from?
Mhm.
And what am I going to do? And I think having time to do that is a good thing.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I'm not sure, do you do any kind of mindfulness meditation or anything like that?
Very rarely. I'm not very good. I know you do. I
Yeah, I can
started
recommend
it.
someone who's really, really, really good. I love the guy. He's changed my life.
I agree. I think he's wonderful too.
Hmm.
So I've just not had the patience to follow
Yes,
his
Sam
30
Harris
days.
has changed my life.
Yeah, Sam
I can
Harris is
be
really good.
way, way, way more focused.
Yeah.
way more focused when and then I can really live in the moment as well, instead of having a million thoughts go through my mind. I can
Yeah.
just take it one by one and deal with them. So it's been a tremendous shift, but I've been doing it for the past 4 or 5 months, I think, maybe even more.
Okay. Yeah. So it makes a shift quite quickly when you
Mhm.
commit to something like this.
I can't
And
recommend more for anyone who's listening.
okay.
Maybe even any type of mindfulness or meditation. I don't believe there's only one good provider, but it is worth it, because you learn how to focus and how to deal with emotions, how to deal with stress, how to deal with a lot of inputs, and just
Yeah.
recognize it one by one. And it's very interesting.
I think it's these things we know that it helps your
Mhm.
mental capacity as well as your physical one. So yeah, the more we can do these things and fit them into our lives, the better.
The better.
Yes.
So, Alison, you work in assessments, and you are certified in quite a lot of them.
Mm,
If organizations would like to go out there, and then we talk about individuals as well, would like to
yeah.
go out there and use some of the tools, what would be some good tools that they could use to measure competencies, abilities, cognitive abilities, knowledge?
Well, there are loads of them out there. There really are a whole selection, and it depends on, from an organisational perspective, how much money you're willing to spend, how important it's based on good quality research and data, and how validated it
Mhm.
is. So you can buy some cheap and cheerful 360-degree feedback stuff, for example, for about £30-40 a pop. But there's no research behind it. It's just, you could create a similar thing by SurveyMonkey,
Mhm.
and get some feedback. And I don't want to denigrate it. Getting feedback is a really useful activity. And so, you know, that can be a powerful thing for people. If you're wanting to go down the psychometric route, then you do want to come from a very validated, verified research base.
Mhm.
And for me, the best on the market is, of course, the Corn Ferry tool set. So I'm quite openly biased about it. I love the fact that it's research based. They have got research going back to, well, when hay was invented, because they own hay now, back to the 1940s. But a lot of the original research around the 360s and the potential assessments goes back to the 1970s. They've got huge stuff. And the norms and the quality of the data behind it is really second to none.
Mhm.
So I think when you're looking at whether it's the 360 and getting feedback, and then they benchmark you against a whole range, so you can be benchmarked by level, by industry, um, you know, it can really help a leader or a manager or a new recruit to see how they're perceived by everybody and how they compare to other people in the world. And the other good thing is it comes with a whole load of top tips of what to do with it.
Mhm.
So they don't just leave you saying, oh, well, you're not very good at managing conflict. They then say, and this is what you could do to improve. And, that's what it's all about. It's not about, oh
Where
my
you are,
God,
yeah.
I'm rubbish.
Yes.
It's like, how can I get to where I need to be? And then they've also got, I'd again say it's the best assessment tool around for long-term potential. It's called a potential solution, or the assessment for leadership potential. They've got two names for it running at the moment. And it measures 7 things, one of which is your learning agility. And again, it gives you development actions to come out at the end of this. So it's really good at helping people identify, are there certain things that I am really strong at? What am I not so good at? I want to be a CEO one day. Where's the gaps, and how should I plan short-term, medium-term, long-term actions to move there? So you can have really rich conversations with people that are very insightful, and then give good quality focus on what to do next. And if you're really helping them achieve their ambitions and aspirations, there's some clear pathways that we can do. So I think it opens up the eyes to pretty much everybody who's ever had one of those assessments.
True.
Yeah.
What I also like about them is that they have all of the tools necessary for someone to use their research. So whatever you can think of, from the actual assessments to development tools to succession planning to mapping, on skills and depth and all of that. So
Yeah,
it's
whether you're doing an interview
yeah.
or succession planning, or just even saying, what is it I'm going to do to
Mhm,
give someone feedback? They're
mhm.
all linked and connected. Yeah,
True.
it's a really good tool set.
It's a really good. Yeah, the others can be good as well, but yeah, I'm a fan of this one also. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
I
I
can.
mean, there's lots of others I've been trained in. I like Hogan.
Mhm,
Some of the SHL tools are
mhm.
good. So they all
DDI
have a
is also
different
good.
place.
Yes, yeah, but it's
DDI has
yeah.
good tools. So, they all have their place. And I think, it depends on what you're trying to do, and
Mhm.
and your budget and the organization's culture as well. Because different cultures, some
Different.
places
Yeah,
might not want certain
but you
things.
can still, I think, the message that needs to be out there is that you can assess potential, you can assess learning agility, you can assess thinking complexity and cognitive complexity. There are
Yeah,
a wide array of tools that you can use, so you can make sure that you have the right people in place, either to hire or to promote or to just have for succession planning, or just to
yeah.
understand who you have in the organization. Now
Yeah,
let me
we
ask
can
you.
do really rigorous
Mhm,
tests of people that help us really get under their skin in a positive way. Because, I mean, there's nothing worse than having the wrong person in the job.
mhm,
They just struggle, it's painful for them. And so I think, one of the things that you can do with these tools and assessments is also identify where somebody might be able to do a job, but actually what support they need to be successful. So you can use it in a very, growth perspective way for
mhm.
hiring, as well as looking at long-term potential development. Mm.
True. Now, are you? I know you've tried some game-based assessment as well. Where do you still like the classical ones or game-based?
Oh, well, yes, I mean, I suppose at the moment I do like game-based stuff, but that's also because I'm quite a gadgety person, and I do like new technology. I would definitely be an early adopter of
Mhm.
anything, to say the least. So as you like technology
Yeah.
as well. Um, so yeah, I think my frustration with a lot of the game-based stuff I've seen is actually it's not rigorous enough. There's still geeks that are developing it in many cases, and so I think there's room for it, but it's not there yet.
Hmm.
So yes, and the new stuff, the full assessments that we're doing more from a psychological perspective, I think they've come a long way as well. So they've not ignored the technology that's there. And I think some of the ways that we can measure, for example, the assessment of leadership potential is looking at 7 different factors. It wouldn't be possible to have created such an assessment if we didn't have the technology that we've got
True.
now. Yeah.
Now I've just seen Pymetrics moved the needle a bit, and they got into the AI 50 for the United States. It's only two HR AI, if you want, tools
Yeah.
that made it, and one of them is Pymetrics. And by the way, this is not a podcast sponsored by Pymetrics, Corn Ferry,
No, no,
DDI, or anyone else. It's
we're
just
just talking about
we're just
everybody.
talking about everybody, exactly, as we've been using their tools. Yeah, so I kind of like them, and I've seen a lot of good research behind, and they are transparent enough to share it and to tell what the limitations are and to move forward from there. So I really enjoy them in terms of game based. Yeah, but I've seen like you some developing ones, like let's call them like that.
Yes. So I think it'll be interesting to see where they go. And I think that there's definitely a good place for the game-based
Mhm,
assessments. I think it can really help with some of the aptitudes, and looking
true.
at, raw, particularly with graduates and people who haven't got a lot of experience. So yeah,
So how
and
about
it's fun.
someone who just wants to understand where they are? Do they stand any chance? Because yeah, if you talk about the big companies, Pymetrics, Corn Ferry, and the others, they are more for the companies, for organizations, rather than for individuals. I don't even believe you can do it you can take the assessments as an individual.
You can. So
Okay.
anybody who wanted to
Okay.
take those assessments, they could get in touch with me, and I'd make it possible for them to have the assessments. But they're really expensive. So generally, the price is what's a barrier to individuals. For many of these assessments. And I'd also say that actually, as an individual, it's not necessary. You
Hmm.
don't really need to go to that depth. You can work out what you're good at and not so good at, with some reflection and a good few tools and techniques. Um, what we also know is that the self, as in ourselves, are really poor at identifying our own strengths and weaknesses, particularly our weaknesses. Um, and particularly weaknesses in the interpersonal area, because that's where we get confused about our intentions. So we intended to listen to people, and so are a bit shocked when people say we're bad listeners. And so I think that's one of the things to consider, is that actually you can do your own self-assessment, but you might be somebody who lets yourself off the hook with intentions, or you might be really self-critical as well and beat yourself up, because you've set the bar so high. So to get a balanced view, you need to get some feedback from people, and you also need to become much more of an objective observer of yourself. So taking time to reflect on, what did I do, what did I say, and what was the reaction of people, and then maybe asking people what their reactions are is a good one.
Do
Yeah,
you ever use it? I mean, in when I do coaching, and when someone tells me they need a change, but they don't know their skills, they don't really understand what they're good at, and just to, I send them home. I tell them, hey, go ask your friends, go ask your family,
yeah,
how do they see you?
yeah,
And then I find it that it works for them because they have blind spots, and which they didn't see. Maybe they thought of themselves as very bad at something, but their whole family and friends see them in the reverse way, and they can actually give examples of when that's happened. So I
yeah.
find it kind of powerful, or at least the feedback that I get is that it's kind of powerful to go and ask around and to understand how people perceive you. Did you ever use it?
Yeah, yeah, often,
Hmm.
because one of the really funny things is that, many times when I'm coaching people and we've gone through, a whole battery of different assessments and tests and things, and then they've gone back and shared it with their partner, who's gone, but I could have told you all that. Um, and they found it quite amusing to say, well, actually, my partner said they knew all this. And I don't think we ask openly enough, and we're maybe not always ready to hear it from our partners and our family and friends who do know us really well and have, that positive intent. They want us to be successful too. So I think we can ask them much, much more frequently about
Hmm.
what they think about how we should approach things, what we do well, what we don't do well, and get some ideas from them.
True.
You can also
It
ask,
works.
if you're not comfortable asking people just for stories, for feedback, you can ask them for stories. And so just say to people, what what story have you got that you could tell me that you experienced me at my best,
Hmm.
or something I did really well that you noticed. And getting stories from people is really amazing, because what happens is that people tell stories that you don't even remember, that you didn't think much of, that you hadn't noticed that they were even there, or that it was that big a deal. And so it can be really a shock, the stories that people tell you of these strengths that you have, or these achievements, or these wonderful things. And that's a really good process to go through. And if you're feeling brave, you can ask them to tell you stories about things they didn't appreciate, things when you, let things down, when it could have gone better. And those stories as well can help you understand other people's perspectives and get a better view about where you are and what you can do differently.
Yeah, there is a good saying that perception is reality.
Yeah,
And then
there is.
that's how people react to us, by the way they perceive us, rather than
Yeah,
the way we
exactly.
think we are. So it's an interesting
Yeah,
perspective.
so it is. It's all
Um,
perception.
I think another good one, I just found it and I want to, I've only done it in somewhere in university. You can do for cognitive abilities, for just critical thinking. Ravens is online. So there is, I will share this in the podcast
Yeah,
description. So you can have an assessment done by yourself, which is free. And again, values and that there are free assessments that you can take, which are really based on proven theories, and they are researched and validated. But there are websites on which you can take them for free, and then you can figure out a bit about
What to do.
yourself. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Maybe even some big fives. I will have a look, because nowadays they're trying to modify a bit the big five.
Yeah, so the big 5 personality traits. Again, I mean, we know the previous research was all, oh, it's fixed, but we know again that your personality does shift and change and move. Might not move dramatically, but we grow, we evolve, and I think that we need to embrace that and think about what does that mean for us. And just because you have a certain preference to something doesn't mean to say that you have to behave that way all the time. And we know that people make choices and behave in lots of different ways. So much of the research, and you can do there are various assessments on there for free. So I would just suggest people just Google, the big 5 free assessments, and you'll come up with a list of them.
Yes.
And it will give a view about what they are and what to do about it. But it's really about going back to that agility. I think we need to learn to flex, to be able to behave in a multiple kind of ways according to different situations and different people. And it's recognizing what those situations are, what the people are like, and adjusting how we talk, the tone of voice, and everything. And there's lots of talk about not offending people and inclusion and all of that at the moment, bullying and harassment. And much of that is because of miscommunication, because we don't adapt. We haven't realized, we haven't noticed that somebody's not comfortable with those use of words. So, or the way we've said something, or the way we've, our posture's been, or whatever. And being able to be attuned to that will help us be much more flexible and agile. And then we build better relationships, which then in turn makes collaboration easier and switches on our happy spots. So, yeah.
It's amazing. It's just by finding out what our personality is, then we can start controlling some of the behaviors, right? So personalities is affect cognition, behaviors, and motivations, right? Some of that it's harder to change, but behaviors, for example, if we know that in a given situation we always act in a certain way, then we can control ourselves and do it better and learn a different way of doing it. So some things can be.
Yeah. And if we find that we keep doing the same thing, we can then question ourselves, is this back to my immunity?
Yes.
Do I have a little immunity on this? Which means whenever this happens, a trigger kind of goes off. And that awareness then makes it possible for us then to pay more attention and think about how we might approach it differently. So it gives us more control. And in the world that's so ambiguous, and we don't know what jobs we're going for, and whether our job will still be around, or whether, the way that we live is going to be so changed, I think it's important that we learn to be agile in lots of ways. So,
True.
yeah.
Now, I know we've been talking for quite some time, but I don't want to let you go before we talk about teams, right? We spoke about individuals and organizations, but there's still a bit that I want to talk to you about teams and how they work together and how they deal with the same kind of uncertainties. And how does it work at a team level when you have multiple people collaborating and each of them is dealing with their own ambiguities and their own change, their own transformation, and it can be part of their job, it can be part of themselves. What makes a team work in such situations, and what do you do on a daily basis to help facilitate that?
Well, that's a lot of questions there in one go. Well, yes, I've been working with my business partner, Jenny, on a framework. We've called it the 5 dynamics of high performing teams. And it's really like a team ecosystem, as it were, which takes a very systemic view about teams. And it says that they move, they evolve. Nothing stays the same in teams. So why do we fix things with teams? Because they're not fixed. We're members of multiple teams, often in an organization. And, each of those teams, if you think of each person learning something new every day, then you kind of shifting a little bit each individual. And how do we capture that? And how do we make sure that we're adjusting our team. So people leave and they join, and organization goals get changed, and we also have results being delivered and new results and targets being set. So all of that causes shift and movement within teams. And I think it's really important that the team has processes and routines in place, but also the relationships working well so that we can capture the value that can be created out of that energy and that momentum within the team. And you hear about, oh, high performing teams. And then when you talk to people, you realize that actually there's an awful lot of tolerance for mediocre teams,
Mhm.
that people just ticking along, being happy. And yet, when somebody's in a high performing team, the stories they tell, the passion and the warmth in their face is truly wonderful.
So what
And I
makes a team? What
think that's
what
what we're after.
what
So
is
you
a
have to so
well-performing
you
team?
have to start. Simon Sinek talks about purpose. So you have to know what your own purpose is, why you're part of this team, and what you want to get out of it. Now, you might be part of the team just because it's a job and you want to earn some money, but you're spending a lot of time there. So what would be some other things that you'd quite like to get out of this time you spend in that job? So it might be great working relationships. I'd like to make some friends, or I'd like to create something new. So understanding your purpose, what would make it really great for you to be in that team and for it to be a successful, satisfying thing for you?
Mhm.
What would that be? And then link that to what the organization sees the purpose of the team. So if you can get those two to connect, and then you can connect that to everybody else in the team, and you all know what each other's wanting to get out of it, then you can collaborate and all together get your own purpose plus the team's purpose at the same time.
It
And
sounds
that's
easy.
when you get a synergy.
It sounds easy, but I don't think it's that easy.
It's a process. So we've developed a process to
Mhm.
take people both through thinking about the organizational team purpose, but then also the individual purpose, and then how you share that with all the members of the team so that the team can do it in a way that feels concrete. It feels very precious to each individual, and sometimes it's really insightful. They'd never even thought about it. The interesting thing, I did it with a leadership team, and and they run multiple organizations, this group, and they'd been working together for about 3 years. And I think one person was new to the team, if I remember correctly, but they had this conversation. We got the team purpose out, or the organization purpose, and then what this team was doing. And then we went around and we did some work on each individuals, and they do it on their own to start with and then share things. And when they were sharing it, the insights, the people were going, I never knew that. Is that so? And it was a really positive thing. And people were really excited to understand what people wanted to get out of their job and what they brought to it and why they were there. And it was a really rich experience. And the team loved it so much that they have added to that and are doing things with it going on their own. So it really helped them all to connect to each other as well as to why they were coming into work every day and what they were doing. We then talk about the results
Mhm.
because, it's all very nice having all of that stuff, but actually you need to know what you're delivering, because that's why the organization is paying you to come in. And so then we make sure everybody's clear about what the goals are, what you're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
and using agile methods. So this is where we go into sprints, short-term plans, reviewing them, working hard on it, coming up, looking at the results, reviewing, going forward. And then once we've identified and clarified all the results, and we come up with what's called the 5 big whats, that everybody can then remember, then we start talking about the relationships, routines, and review, and those work in harmony together. So if you change something to do with the relationships, like someone leaves, then that shifts all the relationships in the team. So you need to talk about that and work out, well, how is it all going to happen now? And that shifts the routines and then the review processes. If you change the routines, then that will shift the relationships. So making people much more cognizant about those things and working through what are they that we want to do. And the review process is there to stop it becoming a static thing,
Mhm.
because actually it needs to shift all the time. We're in a very volatile and uncertain world. And so I think, trying to say, oh, we have a weekly 2-hour team meeting is a ridiculous thing. Maybe you do it for 6 weeks for a sprint, but then maybe 2 hours is not necessary all the time forevermore. So reviewing it and saying, well, actually, let's just have a 5-minute check-in might be more relevant. So challenging some of those routines and ways of working so that they're much more flexible.
Do you feel that there's more trust between members of the team when they come to a training, and then they're more vulnerable and can discuss more authentic about what they expect from a team, or then versus when they're in a company and they have to work together every day? Or maybe it's just because they don't have the time to think about it or to have these discussions.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people don't get that time to discuss. There is definitely something about feeling safe at work.
Mhm.
And there is also a piece of research that was done about 15 years ago where they found out that people trusted a stranger more than their own boss. And whenever I've related that to people, they've gone, well, yes, of course, because the stranger, you're never going to see them again. I mean, they have no impact on you. Whereas your boss, obviously, particularly if they're going to do your performance review, has got an impact. So there is that sort of consequences to it. So I think it when you're talking about relationships, they're very complex, and trust is a multiple aspect.
Mhm.
I think when people say, oh, we want to do a trust building, it's like, no, trust takes time, and trust takes multiple layers for it to flourish, and many interactions. And it can be lost very quickly. So I think trust has to be something that is kind of looked after by the whole group. And you don't need the same level of trust for different types of teams and activities either. So, I don't need the same level of trust in, an activity I'm doing one day with one person that I only work with once every 6 months, and it's a small piece of work, than something else which is much bigger and has much more impact. So I think understanding how much trust and what the trust is that you need to have is also quite an important thing. So we don't need to be going around trusting everybody with everything. That's an unrealistic, unhuman
True.
kind of desire. But there's lots we can do, and many activities and tools that we give to managers to help them build that kind of safe environment. Because what you want within a team is a team that can express their opinions, challenge when things are wrong without it being a challenge against the personal. So we know that good decisions are made when people can really openly challenge the content, but not the people who providing it. So that personal challenge will be taken as a personal
We
conflict
all
and an
do it.
attack.
We all do.
And we all do it. It's really, but it's hard to do.
Mhm.
But you can start to learn about that as a team and start to be able to signal to each other, actually, that's a bit on the red zone. Can you tone it back? And just go into the data, please. So that idea that we can challenge openly, because then we can stop mistakes being made,
Mhm.
or we can learn from mistakes, because failure is not going to happen until you can tolerate that, because then people don't want to be humiliated in front of others. So,
True.
we've got lots of human aspects playing in these things.
True. But it is highly
So,
important in performing teams. That's what I find: communication and trust. And I think communication doesn't happen without trust.
yeah, well, I
And
think,
that back and forth. Yeah.
yeah, MIT said the biggest difference between highly productive teams and the rest was the quality and the pattern of
Mhm.
communication. So not so much what they communicated, but the how they communicated was what made the difference. And thinking about that, I think, is where people can really make a difference in their own teams.
True.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? When I started and graduated psychology, all they were talking about, all of the organizational auditors and analysts, and they were doing this organizational diagnosis. That's how it was called. I think it's still done nowadays. The big
Oh, is it?
always I was always laughing, and I said, this is not possible. The only thing that they would find is it's not working in a company would be communication. And I would say, no, I wasn't working at that point, right? I was still a student. I say, oh, come on. Everywhere I go, I mean, I can go in there, tell them it's communication, and they can just pay me the money. I don't need to do any kind of research. I already know from all of the big guys, everyone has an issue with communication. And then it turns out that actually that is a big deal, because
It is.
communication depends on so many other skills, competencies, environment, and so on. So it's still a
Yeah.
big deal.
And when you've got people who are working, in dispersed environments, not together like we are, you've got
Mhm.
people with different mother tongues who come from different cultural backgrounds, that all layers on the complexity of it too. So the misunderstandings and the miscommunications, possibilities increases exponentially. So, how do you navigate through that? And I think we have to go tentatively and just be very open. And that's where that people agility comes in,
True.
where we have to keep adapting our people agility because we're learning about each other. Yeah,
Alison, I think we touched on quite a lot of subjects.
we have. I
Yes.
can't believe how long we've talked.
Yeah, it's
I,
been I think it's been a good hour and a half or something like this. I
mm,
cannot see. I don't know when we started. So
I don't
we've
know.
been so deep in the conversation, I have no idea.
Yeah,
So, but I think we've touched quite on a lot of subjects, and it would be nice to do this again, maybe on other topics, because there's so much to discuss about this.
yeah.
But before we finish, how can people get in touch with you? How can people get in touch with Jenny or Management Dynamics? How can people get in touch with you in case they need coaching or in case they just need advice or?
Yeah, well, they can get in touch with me by emailing Alison at managementdynamics.com. It's management-dynamics.com. Or go onto the website. There's a contact button there that you can fill in, and I'll get back in touch with you. You
Okay,
can also
so the
message me,
website is
management-dynamics.com.
okay.
Yep. Or you could go onto my LinkedIn profile and find me that way and send me a message. So
Perfect.
would be lovely to hear from people. So
Yeah,
I'm
anyway, I
always
will put your
interested.
contacts when we have the description of the podcast,
Yeah.
so people can get in touch. Thank
Yes.
you so much for tonight.
Oh, thank you,
Now we
Julia. I've
can
had
go
such
and
fun.
enjoy a glass of wine.
I know.
Yeah.
I think that's
I
the
can
best
see your
bit of
eyes.
today.
Yes. Perfect. Say hello to everyone at home, and thank you so much for doing this.
Oh,
It's
my
been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
I
Thank
look
you.
forward to next time.
Me too. Take care. Have a really nice
Bye.
evening. Bye. Bye. Bye.